edition of Floyd Street's Finest. I'm Jack Grossman. He's Mark Ennis, host of The Drive, 3 to 6 p.m. weekdays over on 93.9 The Ville. Mark, this is a rare opportunity because normally I ask someone to come on the podcast with a plan to do something, and then something absolutely insane happens, and we end up talking about something big picture being down negative. This is the first time I've asked someone to come on the podcast, and something good has happened for Louisville basketball to where, yes, we might get into like the coaching future and all that stuff and the big picture stuff later. But Louisville basketball won a game against an actual team. This is weird. This is awesome.
A good team. And it's funny because like on like a 24-hour period where Belichick retires, Saban retires, Pete Carroll retires, and Louisville fans are like, but we beat Miami. Why are you talking about that?
Yeah.
And you know what? They're right. I'm a firm believer in that. Like, if you're going to give people a hard time and be very critical, which we have been, of when they don't do the right things, that you gotta give them the equal and opposite reaction when they do the right things. And I think last night, you don't have to, just like every single time something bad happened didn't mean you should have to fire him. You don't have to try to extrapolate to the ultimate conclusions about what should happen here. They just went and played a game, and they went and played way better than we're used to. We said it would take something we're not used to seeing, and I'll be damned if they didn't just go out there and do something we're not used to seeing. And there are so many elements of it that I find encouraging. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I think that they've turned some corner, or that this is the new way of them doing things. But if it was, that would be great. But for a night, they went to Miami, a team that played in the Final Four. These guys it's a very skilled team. Kind of a funky, good matchup for Louisville as a shorthanded team. But they went and really forced Miami to play their way. And when have we ever said that they forced somebody else to play a certain way since Kenny's been here? Have we done it once?
Maybe the Indiana game before IU went zone. That might be good, but Indiana allows everyone to do that. So I don't know how much credit I would give them that. But Texas, maybe for like those two games in MSG for parts of it, maybe. But other than that, never. We haven't seen that. But Louisville, as you said, did the job of, they kept, especially those last 15, 16 minutes, for the most part, they kept Miami out of transition. They, forced them to play half-court offense. They were really, really patient on the offensive end on there. And I think that was the biggest theme for everything for Louisville. They were deliberate, patient, and worked the ball to get the ball to the spots they wanted, whether that be, Mike James early, Braden Huntley-Hatfield that entire second half. Louisville did what they wanted offensively, and they actually stayed true to the game plan for the majority of that second half on the offensive end. And to me, that was the biggest difference, because Miami, kind of sleepwalks through this game. We'll get to that for sure. But to UofL's credit, they took full advantage, and they actually made Miami pay for not showing up in that game. And they executed things that they hadn't done. They had chances to fold, and they didn't do it over and over again. And that's a credit to, the roster, the players, and yes, the coaching staff and Kenny Payne for doing the damn thing and actually going out and winning that game.
Yeah, I thought it was really funny in the second half. Seth Greenberg almost trying to coach the team from the color chair. Every single time Louisville got the ball, he was like, you got to get it inside to Hatfield. You got to get it to Hatfield. And you know what? He was right. They did need to. And just about every single time that they did, something good happened. And it's the first time I've really felt like they had a tailor-made game plan for this matchup. We think this will work. We're determined to do this. And then they went out there and did it, and it was successful. And the Brandon Huntley-Hatfield that played like he did last night is the guy I think people had hoped to get from day one. And this is kind of the theme with Kenny, not to bring anything too terribly negative, but good things that show up way too slow. But you do have to acknowledge them as good things. He was dominant last night. They couldn't stop him from getting where he wanted to go. We've waited for that. And when they get it, man, it really does make them better, especially on a weird night where he starts Hersey Miller, out of nowhere.
Bizarre. That was really bizarre, but
it's funny because you're like, all right, fine. You guys don't think I'm a disciplinary enough. I'm benching the guy you all like in Ty-Laur Johnson. Like, no, not him. But what they have left and how they played, the body language on the bench, from the guys that weren't in the game, all of it was, you have to just revel in the fact that you got a full 40-minute game of the stuff you've been hoping for. And either they're going to start being that way and you get to be excited about that, or it'll just be the exception that proves the rule. And when the year's over, he'll be gone. But for that night, that's a Miami team that like their only recent loss was in overtime at Wake Forest. That's very skilled, and Louisville had an answer for everything they tried. They didn't fold. I think we're used to those pressure moments. Something goes bad, and you're like, okay, this 4-point lead is about to be a 9-point deficit, and it never did. And they had this stretch where they score, and Sky Clark steals the inbound, and quickly dishes, and they get another basket, and you're like, God, when was the last time that happened?
That was the moment where I was like, because Miami felt like they were kind of just playing with their food all game, but they kind of kept Louisville at arm's length the entire time. Louisville got the lead a couple of times. Or once at 61-60, or not 61-60, 59-57, I believe it was. They had tied it a few times. Miami had that transition bucket after the first time Louisville tied it. And, to Louisville's credit, they didn't panic. They worked their stuff. They moved the ball, and they got Huntley-Hatfield in the post to tie the game right back up on the next possession. But that moment of Mike James getting that layup, Sky Clark getting the steal, passing to James, and James making the extra pass back to Clark for the three, that was where I was like...
And him knocking it down.
Yeah, and him knocking it down. That's where I was like, holy shit. They're going to win this game.
Yeah.
They very well could win this game. You can tell at that moment, that's where everything shifted in terms of, okay, they're keeping it close, keeping it competitive. Like, oh my God, they're going to do the damn thing. And it wasn't completely easy from there on out. Miami answered, but Louisville answered, Miami twice in that span. But that was just huge. And on Huntley-Hatfield, Norchad Omier is a dude who, yes, he's only 6'5", but he's one of the best post defenders in college basketball. He's super, super, super strong. And he's averaged a double-double for 3 straight years. How many guys do that? No matter what the competition is. I the first 2 years at Arkansas State, but he was absolutely pivotal in their Final Four run last year. Miami doesn't play a lot of defense, but the one thing you can normally count on is Norchad Omier showing up every day. And for Huntley-Hatfield to quite literally, dominate him. Yeah, he bullied him in that second half. And Miami never made an adjustment. They never tried to send double teams or anything like that, which we can question that on their side. But for Louisville to see that matchup and to say, unless you change something, we're going to win that matchup every single time, to stay disciplined enough to keep going to it. And for Huntley-Hatfield to actually win that on both sides of the ball. I mean, on the other end, Omier didn't have a field goal the entire second half. Huntley-Hatfield had 17 in the second half. I mean, that was the entire game right there. Louisville winning that individual matchup changed the tone of everything that happened in that contest.
And I think to give Kenny and the staff credit for this, I'd love to hear about the process of coming up with this. But I kind of asked this during the game. Are they running the pack line? For a large portion of that game, it was everybody's feet were just inside the 3-point line. It almost looked like a 2-3 zone. And every single time Omier got the ball on offense, he got doubled immediately. Yeah. It was very obvious. They thought we're going to go at him on when we have the ball. And when he has the ball, when Miami has the ball, we're doubling him and making him get it out of his hands. And then Miami stopped trying because of the post doubles. And it really was just like kind of a mock Virginia defense where they weren't allowing dribble penetration and they were doubling once they got it in the post. And Miami fell into what maybe this is what Louisville thinks the trap should be. And if so, good on them. But Louisville struggles with like ADHD on defense, where the deeper you get into the shot clock, the less likely they are to be as dialed in as they were the first wave. And Miami just obliged. Miami just repeatedly shot shots with 17, 18 seconds, one ball screen, one pass. I think Miami really thought any old time now Louisville's going to pack it in. We've watched these games, we know, and all of a sudden at the under 4, they weren't even within striking distance. Like, I think they really just were like, let's just keep going through the motions. We know the fold will come, and it never did. And I props to them for that. Is this the first time Louisville basketball has ever been overlooked? Like, it might be.
Yeah.
I really do think this was a time where Miami was like, couldn't get up for this one.
Which
and Louisville was able to beat them.
Which that's sad from one standpoint that Louisville's fallen to that, but we don't really need to get into that today.
It's not Louisville's fault though.
Yeah, no, it's not Louisville's fault.
Miami couldn't,
Yeah, and credit to Louisville for taking advantage. I thought the Norchad Omier double was, to be completely honest, that was about the only thing I was happy with that Louisville did defensively. I mean, I thought Louisville was.
Miami missed a lot of shots.
That's where I was getting at. Like, Miami's a team that going into the game was second in the country in 3-point percentage and top 5 in free throw percentage. It takes some luck sometimes to pull off a massive upset. And Miami was 11 of 34 from 3, which is fine. That's 32%. But that's about 10, 12 percentage points off of where they were or for the season for where they entered the ball game. Free throw wise, they were 8 of 15. Like, that's a top 5. They were. I'm not sure what they were exactly. I knew they were second in 3-point percentage going to the game. They're 6th right now on KenPom and free throw percentage. So I'm assuming they were top 5 before that. But for them to go 54% from the free throw line, Norchad Omier, who I think Louisville absolutely frustrated on the offensive end, and was 87% from the free throw line coming into the season. He was 3 of 7 and missed a critical front end of a 1-and-1 late. Like that,
and all of this in a game that ended up being 9 points.
Yeah, like those are some real uncharacteristic things from Miami. To where, yes, they rushed some shots late in the game, but a lot of it I truly think was just they missed a lot of open shots they normally make. Which
and Louisville closed the loop though on a lot of those missed shots. They've played other teams who've beaten them pretty soundly, where they don't shoot crazy high percentages,
but they get a bunch of offensive rebounds.
Exactly. And Louisville, there were a lot more one-shot possessions that were even good shots that Miami missed, and where Louisville sort of really screws itself so far this year has been allowing that to be another shot and not really getting the psychological feeling of like stringing together stops. And for the first time, they really did do that. And I think the thing that we all watch for now is like, does any of this carry forward? Does Mike James start to play like more of a confident shooter? It's the first time I think I remember him his body like moving forward as he was shooting the ball. Like he's like, this is go, like his chest was out, like this is going in. And there was the one that he really didn't even set his feet. It was almost like it was a transition 3 right at the top of the key. And it looked like he was like, I can't miss. And when he let it go, I was like, that is going in. And these were all different guys and beyond welcome. Everybody needed this. It doesn't matter if this changes anything big picture. That was fun as hell.
Yeah, it was. And on Mike James, I mean, he's been on a roll the last few games. To where I'm not expecting to go for 26 every night, but I think
it's in there.
Yeah, it's in there. And he's become their most consistent perimeter guy to score.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times where Sky Clark will show up. Ty-Laur Johnson will have some big point outputs every once in a while where he breaks double figures. But I think Mike James is, James and Huntley-Hatfield. Those are the 2 dudes you got to ride. I mean, those are your most 2 consistent scorers on that team. When Trey White comes back, it's got to be Mike James, BHH, or BHH, Mike James in those orders. And James really kept him in the game early with those 16 points because no one else really showed up early in that game for UofL. But for James, just go scorched earth, hit 4 threes in the first 7 minutes. That was like, okay, you can kind of settle into the game now when you have a guy do that and keep you, involved. And for me, the biggest moment, other than, we talked about, the steal and the inbounds to have that 5-point swing. Louisville found themselves down 54-45 with about 15 minutes left. And that was the moment where I'm like, okay, we've seen this movie before where, they play for a little while. They came back, tied the game early in the second half. Miami goes on that 8-0 run. They create that distance. And it was like, all right, I think this is where Louisville probably folds.
Yeah. I think Miami thought that too.
Everyone thought that. I mean, I don't blame Miami for thinking that. They've watched Louisville. They know what they've done. But instead, here's Louisville's next two possessions. They're patient. They move the ball. They have probably 5-6 passes. They reverse the ball twice before getting BHH in the post for a drop step layup. Routine. The next possession, they get a stop. Then Sky Clark comes down, drives, kicks to Curtis Williams for a wide open three, which he hits. That wasn't where they made the big run and they immediately tied the game. But those two plays that got you back within in 5, it lets you settle down, and it says, okay, we're still at arm's length. It's not getting to double digits. And it allowed them to really kind of, you could see that's where the tone of the game kind of changed. That's where Louisville started to gain confidence of, okay, we didn't let this get out of hand. We're reeling them back in a little bit. And from that moment, Louisville went on a 21-7 stretch that ended with them being up 66-61 over 7 minutes. They held Miami to 7 points in 7 minutes. Like, that's hard to do. No matter how many.
It's hard for Louisville to do that to anyone. Yeah. And no one does that to Miami.
Yeah. And yes, Miami missed a lot of open shots in that stretch, but Louisville still held them to 7 points in 7 minutes. That to me was the defining moment, one of the defining moments of the game, to be able to make a couple plays there, get you back into it, instead of Miami stretches that, 12, 13, 14, 15 points. That's probably curtains on that game. It really is. That was a monumental moment for me.
And I'll add to it a surprise to me to see Hersey Miller starting. Not a surprise to see Hersey Miller playing, because I think almost every fan will tell you, like, in terms of how do I feel when I see this person out there, Zan Payne, rage, everyone gets mad, but there are a handful of guys, like, when they come in, you're like, that looks more like what I'd like to see. And Ty-Laur Johnson's like that.
Yeah.
Hersey Miller's like that. So on the one hand, kind of surprised to see, like, the most popular guy, Ty-Laur Johnson, get benched. But at the same time, interesting to see that Hersey was in there. He seems to resonate with people in terms of effort level and energy. And I think if you ask fans, like, give me a guy who doesn't know what he's doing, but does it 100% over a guy who doesn't have any fear of coming out, and loafs. And so I just wonder if some of what we saw last night was just all of these guys being like, holy crap, he benched one of those guys for Hersey. Because it looked more circumspect, all of them. It looked different. And maybe for the first time, the guys were like, he's not afraid of us. Because that's how I feel like he treats them. Like, he's afraid of getting on the wrong side of them. He's kind of an indulgent stepdad, with them, instead of drawing hard lines. I mean, I have a soon-to-be, stepdaughter in my own house, and I know I treat my own kids different than her. I don't feel as entitled to, draw hard lines than I do with my own and all that sort of thing. And that's how Kenny's been. And it didn't look like that last night. Everybody was more animated, more intense, had a little bit more of an edge to them, and maybe just even the tiniest little mark of accountability paid some dividends. And I hope he's emboldened by it. I hope we see more of that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it goes back to two things I think of when you say that. Number one was when you look at last year, when they're kind of in that mode of these kids have been through so much, trying to coddle them and get them through it. I don't know if it took him too long to get out of that mode with how he treated the kids, even though, it's a very different group for the most part on the roster this year than it was last year, to where he finally had that light go off that says, bleep it. I mean, we need to do something here to change anything. Then I go back to, he is a Calipari disciple. And if there's one thing we know about John Calipari, even if things aren't going well, he's still going to start BJ Boston every game, or he's going to give Nick Richards that pity start. He very much sticks by his guys to the very end. So those are kind of the two things I think of. So maybe breaking away from that a little bit on Wednesday night. And it absolutely did help him because, Louisville's in a spot where with 7 healthy scholarship players, you're probably thinking if you're, Sky Clark or Mike James or Danilo or literally anyone. I mean, I'm not trying to single any guy out, but you're thinking, well, there's 7 healthy dudes on this roster who have scholarships. He's gonna have to play me. So what matters? I mean, we're not very good. we don't have any other options. Why not? And then to see him start Hercy Miller is something that, I'm not going to lie. I kind of laughed it off when I saw it. I was like,
thought
really?
It was flailing.
Really?
I said it was 2018 Petrino flailing is what I thought.
Like it's you're pivoting to Master P's walk-on son who's been in the program for 2 years that has never gotten a real chance. That's this isn't Rudy out here. Hercy Miller isn't Rudy.
Well, I think a lot of Louisville fans heard saw that and they're like, now you want to do this? Yeah. But maybe that is what worked about it, is that it's like, even with 7 scholarship players, no, I'm not putting you out there. You're not starting. You're not going to rely on us being shorthanded, which is exactly what we wanted to see last year. I think about this all the time. I mention it all the time. People have to be tired of hearing about it. But I remember Luke last year, after about a month of the season, saying, if it was going to be like this, I would have started all the walk-ons. And yeah, we're still going to lose to Wright State and App State and all that, but we're going to lose by 40 because you guys are going to learn we're not doing that. And that these 1-point losses were the worst thing that really could have happened, because they were like, we're almost there. And you weren't. And maybe he's finally learned this. And if we get to the end of Kenny's tenure and like the epilogue or like the eulogy here is like a good person who learned the lessons too slow, well, so be it. But it did seem like there was some awareness of like, we have to change up some things. And it did seem to land. We'll see if it carries forward.
Yeah. And they have, it's not a great stretch coming up,
no,
but to say the least, I do think, NC State is not great. You get them at home. So if you're going to win any of these games, I think that's the one. But after that, you get, Carolina on the road. You get Duke, you get Virginia. It's
here's the thing that worries me about NC State.
Yeah.
I big picture agree with you, and just in terms of like a team profile. But the one thing we know they feel really pretty good about and that works is sort of playing through Brandon Huntley-Hatfield and him he's not
DJ
doing
Burns.
that. Yeah. I mean, I have watched him back a guy down from the 3-point line. I mean, I have watched him like a pick and roll, get like a ball, a handoff, and just back a guy down. Like,
he's fun to watch.
He is fun to watch. I totally agree. He's invigorating. I totally agree with that. But so they won't be able to do that. But they're also crazy.
Yes.
Like, they are wild. And it's very easy for me to see Louisville somehow being the more level-headed team in that game, weird as it is to say. But you're right. This is as difficult a stretch as there is on the schedule in terms of matchups and quality teams. But we would have said Miami was one of the worst of all the matchups. And we got what we got.
Maybe we should have, not that I thought they were going to beat them coming in, but if you remember last year, I mean, yes, Miami beat them by about 40 in the Center in November, but the game in Coral Gables, Louisville only lost by 8, and they led for portions of that game. So maybe we should have seen some a little bit coming. I'll put it this way: if this ends up just being a 1-game mirage, a la, Archie Miller's second year where they lose 12 out of 13 games, but the one they win was in East Lansing against a Michigan State team that made the Final Four, which that's still insane to me. But if this ends up being mirage, maybe we look back and just say Louisville's a good matchup with Miami for whatever reason, and Miami overlooked them. But I do think
this loss though probably will cost Miami like a seed line.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Clemson game last year cost them an NCAA tournament bid.
Absolutely. This will hurt Miami for sure.
Yeah, which that's the type of thing you can't do if you're Miami, which is, I don't want to lean too far into that, but I mean, losing to Louisville at home, you said 1 seed line, that could very well be a 2 seed line type game. Like that's,
and just to add to the comedy of all of this, listening to Levitard this morning, Mike Ryan, I can't, he says, I can't believe my blue blood program lost to a football school. Just to turn the whole thing kind of on its head, with them coming off a Final Four and all of that. Yep. But Louisville does well against Miami. We've got that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, is there a basketball version of the boots?
I can't even name any historical Miami basketball figures. I mean,
anything before like Shane Larkin, you got
Constantine Popa. Constantine Popa from a very, very long time ago. Florida's first Final Four in the mid-90s. They beat Miami in the Elite Eight. And
really? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I'm sure you must have loved that.
I most certainly did. That was a great Florida team that had Dimitri Hill, big fat Dimitri Hill, Andrew DeClerc, those guys. What a wild
Florida's had
time.
some good teams.
And then basically nothing happens in Miami basketball until they hire Jim Larinaga.
Pretty much. Yeah, and that was a great hire. They've done great work with Larinaga.
As you guys know by now, we've partnered with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 each and every week of the college basketball season. We have a special offer that will be available starting on Tuesday, January 9th and running through Monday, February 12th, the morning after Super Bowl 58. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, in honor of the big game, you can use the bonus code FIELD158 and you'll get $158 in free bets on your first wager with BetMGM, regardless of whether or not you win that first bet. Here's how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app. Sign up using the bonus code FIELD158. Deposit at least $5 and place your first wager on any game. You'll receive $158 in bonus bets regardless of the outcome of your bet. Just make sure that you use that bonus code FIELD158 when you sign up. And remember, BetMGM is now available under one wallet in select states. As a New Jersey resident, this is super convenient when I have to go cover games in New York or Philly, which happens quite a bit. When you cross state borders, you just log into your existing account and fire away. You don't have to create separate accounts in each state. It's easy, it's simple, it's clean. And most importantly, we have some fun stuff coming up for the heart of the college basketball season. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odd boosts, and my favorite, a nice juicy parlay boost. So download the BetMGM app and sign up today. Field 158.
It's crazy to me in a night or in a stretch of 2 days where, first of all, college basketball over the weekend, Friday night, Purdue, Illinois was great. Saturday was one of the all-time, I think, just sit on your ass on the couch and watch games for about 10 and a half hours.
And watch good teams lose.
Yeah, but the last 2 days, I thought, because, Carolina won at Clemson, Kentucky won at Florida, Kansas survived TCU. You saw most of the good teams actually win. The last 2 nights, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, just all hell's breaking loose in college basketball to where, Purdue loses, Houston loses, Kansas loses, Marquette loses at home to Butler.
Kansas loses to UCF.
Yeah. I mean, like,
what are you doing?
Kansas didn't lose to UCF. I mean, come on. I mean, Houston kind of got their first humbling of the Big 12 with Hilton Coliseum. Tennessee lost. Yeah. Yeah, they got Tolu Smith now back, so they're kind of getting things. Yeah, Clemson I think has kind of fallen back down to earth. They lost to Virginia Tech. My Memphis survives UTSA, but they need overtime and to score 107 points to do it. I mean, for as a bizarre of a 2 nights it was in college basketball, Louisville beating Miami to me is the biggest shocker of anything. And that, says something about where both programs are at right now.
Sure.
But for Louisville to make a headline out of all of that, that's a start. That's something positive that hopefully they can build off of.
Yeah, and they beat a bona fide team too.
Yeah.
Even the best moment of last year is beating Clemson. And that ended up being an NIT team. And
because that wasn't because of that game.
But it wasn't a bona fide tournament team. Like, this is a tournament team coming off a Final Four with most of the pieces back from that, that's beaten other good teams this year. This was,
just this past
easily
week,
the best win they've had.
They beat Clemson at home, and then they
lost in overtime on the road to Wake Forest.
Yeah.
But
those were both without Uga Poplar, their best player.
Yeah, right.
Who was back for this Louisville game, by the way.
Yeah. By the way, Wake Forest, just as a total aside, dark horse, got a chance to win the ACC. They're good.
They are. And Louisville has them on the road in this stretch also coming up, which I haven't seen a lot of them, to be honest. I'm excited to see some of them here moving forward. But Steve Forbes, man, he pulls out of the transfer portal and he hasn't had that big breakthrough yet.
This might be the one, though.
This might be the one. That's kind of where I'm at.
Now that Efton Reed got eligible.
Yeah.
The ACC race is pretty wide open. I think you've got several teams that if they can, a bunch of teams, if I can force you to play my way, will win. I'm not interested in playing your way at all, but I think there's 4 or 5 teams that can win the ACC.
I think right now, and this was actually going to be my next question, was asking about the ACC, but
sure.
But North Carolina, I'm not just saying it because they're, the blue blood and the Tobacco Road School and all that stuff, but Carolina going down to Clemson and actually doing something different than what you just said and winning a defensive grinded out slugfest. I didn't think they were capable of that. And I look at them and I'm like, okay, they're kind of putting everything together now. I mean, even without Baycott being, your vintage Baycott so far this year, Cormac Ryan is still below 30% from 3 on the season. They're beating teams. RJ Davis has been phenomenal. I mean, Harrison Ingram from Stanford has been a really good pickup. Ryan, I expect to start hitting some shots at some point. I mean, Jalen Weathers, our old friend from Louisville, is getting some solid minutes there. I really think they're the class right now, but I'm still not going to argue that this is a vintage ACC like what we saw, like the Zion Williamson year or anything like that. But I do think the league's definitely better than what it's been the last couple seasons. I mean, they said Wake Forest is a dark horse. Clemson, even though they've kind of been humbled the past week or so, I still think they're a good team. Duke's obviously still there. What do you think at Miami? Even I think there's questions now after the Louisville game. But where do you think the state of the league is at this point, and what that means for Louisville?
Yeah, well, it means for Louisville, it's just not going to get any easier. Before yesterday, Ken Palm didn't project them to win any individual game the rest of the year. And I suppose that will change. I think there's a lot going on, but the ACC really struggles. It's not their fault, but it just is what it is, with a perception problem of even when other teams are good, they're the wrong teams, right? So, like, basically, the ACC isn't good if Duke and North Carolina are not good. And it doesn't matter. Virginia has won a national championship. Miami has played in the Final Four. It doesn't matter. Recently, if Duke and Carolina aren't dominant, the ACC's down. Like, it is what it is. But there are teams that Miami is still Final Four caliber. Like, I would not want to play them, especially in condensed tournament ball. Like,
in a game they care about.
They're built for that. That's exactly right. They are built for that. And I think the same goes for Wake Forest. I think with Efton Reed, like Hunter Salas, like that's a really skilled roster. And I think Steve Forbes is a really good coach. I think the league's a lot better. I think at the bottom, I think Louisville's still the worst team. But if you look at Georgia Tech and Notre Dame, like to me, they're light years better than I even expected them to be right now. And if I was a Notre Dame fan, I would be really excited about Shrewsbury kind of down the road. And I think maybe the same for Georgia Tech as well. I think Virginia's not as good as they have been. They're not as skilled. They're not as athletic, even for what they like to do. But so the road's just not going to get any easier for Louisville at all. But I think they could get 6 teams. I think they could probably get 6 or 7 teams in. I think you start getting super ambitious after that. The league can't. Florida State had it rolling, and I don't know what has. I would love a deep dive from someone on sort of what has happened to where they were perennially, deep into the tournament and lottery guys, and you knew everybody was going to be 7 feet tall, and it's wild what they do, and it really just stopped.
Yeah,
and I it's hard for me to say exactly what happened.
It was like the COVID tournament. We talk about this a lot with Louisville about how they were going to be a top 4 seed.
Florida State was going to win the whole thing.
They were going to be a 2 seed, and it's not crazy to say. I mean, I look back on that year. I look at teams that I think would have won the national championship. I mean, I look at Michigan State with Cassius Winston and those guys who were going to be a 1 seed. I look at Seton Hall with Miles Powell and Sandro Mamukelevich-Ville and that team. And I look at Florida State as I think those 3 teams. I mean, obviously, San Diego State was great that year. Dayton was really great. Dayton was going to be a 1 seed that year. Yeah. But I looked at those 3 teams specifically and said, okay, these teams have caught fire right now. And they're playing.
Chris Mack thinks he got screwed. Those teams.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, those were the 3 teams that I felt like really, really got screwed. And there were more teams on, like Kentucky won the SEC regular season by 2 games. They were playing great ball. Louisville kind of had that slide at the end, but weird things happen in the tournament. If they kind of found that, early season, mid-January form again, they could have gone on a run. I mean, there were a bunch of teams there that felt like they were really good position to make a deep tournament run that year. And that I will never get over that tournament being canceled with everything that happened with COVID, because that to me could have been one of the all-time just holy crap, this is incredible NCAA tournaments. But I digress on that. But I want to ask you this. So we've mentioned on this a bunch, like, look, one game doesn't change everything. Let's just try to be happy for the one game. If Louisville's able to build this into something else, we'll see what happens. But for me, I'm kind of viewing it as that Michigan State game for Indiana a couple years ago, to keep pulling back to that from that standpoint of I don't know if it goes straight back to the pile of crap that it's been, but I'm not expecting them to just go out and just suddenly win 4 or 5 games in a row, especially with the gauntlet of a schedule they have coming up. Where do you I guess my question is going to be is I'm still kind of in the mode of he's not getting a year 3.
Yeah.
And until something changes, and maybe this would be the starting building block of that I don't think he's getting a year 3. And you can, I don't think you're going to disagree with me on that, but if you do, please tell me. Unless, maybe he gets like 15, 16 wins. If they do that would be 9 more conference games though. Even if they win 7 conference games, that puts them at what, 13 wins? That's just tough. I mean, I think it's almost like, even though he hasn't been fired yet and he's still the coach there, Jerry Stackhouse a little bit at Vandy, to where the last couple of years they've had these terrible non-conferences, and then all of a sudden, like late January, they put in performances like Louisville did last night.
They pull an all-nighter.
Yeah. Yeah. Other teams, overlook them because, first of all, the name of the jersey is Vanderbilt and they have a losing record, and they just play their butts off, play super physical, and are able to rattle off a bunch of wins at the end. But at the end of the day, it's not enough. And you end up, usually still with a losing record. Last year, they actually made the NIT, but it's just not good enough because, they're doing the same BS this year, to where they lost a bunch of games early on, to where if you're doing that, that's not good enough for Louisville.
Yeah.
Whereas, Vandy, you can do that for 4, 5, 6 years and get away with it. And 2, that would still lead to, them moving on from Kenny, which brings me I did the Jason Anderson question here.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes.
You're right. He'd be proud of this one for sure.
Yeah, he really would be. But the question I'm asking is, looking at Louisville financially, where it's been, state of Louisville had the tweet where they did the open records request where Louisville's paying $39.9 million in buyouts. You add Kenny Payne's $8 million on top of that, that's almost $48 million. I've been under the impression of that's a lot of money to pay to, if you're going to, do something like, Trilly Donovan had the tweet earlier on Thursday morning of just Chris Beard, Mick Cronin, Musselman, and Jerome Tang. I look at especially Musselman, Cronin, and, Goodman said the thing about Scott Drew a couple days ago of, throw him $10 million. Where's Louisville financially paying all this buyout money, not being in the Big Ten or the SEC? What should the expectations be for Louisville fans if they do end up making a change and moving on from Kenny Payne in terms of who they can go out and hire?
I don't think that they are equipped to just money bomb people like we're talking about. Like, say, LSU did to get Brian Kelly or something like that, was like, we're going to get $11 million a year or something like that. Like, it's very easy for us to spend their money and say they should do, that sort of thing. I don't think they're in the position to do that. But if they are anywhere close to being able to do something like that, they should thank Jeff Brown, because nothing does more for your bottom line than a big fat full football stadium. And
Cincinnati for avoiding the Satterfield buyout too.
I mean, you're not wrong, about that either. And add to it that the women draw really well. They are not a drain on revenue at all in that way, even with Jeff being paid well, as a coach. So the football success, I think, came along at just the right time to at least dampen what would be a little bit more weight. And I think Petrino and Chris Mack fall off the budget after this year. Like, I think they're done with them after that. So that helps as well. But they're just not going to be able to do anything splashy outside of the wealthiest of people just stepping up in an additional way. And I think that if I'm Josh Hurd, I started that work weeks ago. In fact, if I'm Josh Hurd, I started the work of, like, we need to arrange dollars and I need pledges from you to execute on this as soon as the buzzer went off after DePaul. Like, this is it. And in a lot of ways, I think that was the time. We're deep enough into the year to where it's not just nerves or new guys. This is a feature, not a bug. We've got to be ready. I was surprised they didn't fire him after Arkansas State. I was surprised they didn't fire him after Kentucky. But I do not believe there's anything to the idea of them waiting until his buyout goes down by $2 million, because you can't do that with the portal and timing. They're just going to have to pay that. But this is where Josh has got to, I think, show his emergency fundraising chops. And for as much as we're talking about the challenge of paying that kind of money, because everything you named is pretty accurate, and then you've got to pay the next guy on top of that. You are weighing it against what happens if we don't do that. And we can't have 4,500 people at the Center. It doesn't let Louisville be Louisville when they draw fewer than, say, 14,000 at the Center.
And when you say Louisville, you don't just mean the university, you mean the city itself, too.
All of it, absolutely, yeah. I mean, businesses, tax base, all of it. Eventually, the state's on the hook for stuff that doesn't get paid for by success down there. Like, a lot's riding on this, which is only, by the way, just added to the angst of watching Kenny just sort of seem so aloof. It's like, what? This can't bother us more than it bothers you, and it sure has felt like it has, for a lot of time. So I think they'll make their efforts to make a splash, but I don't know who that is. But I think the good news, I'm hoping, look, I don't think that they've turned some corner. I think this will be the end for Kenny. I don't think he'll make it to the end of the year. And then I think hopefully fans have been humbled by their uppityness last time, because it was Kenny, and then nobody else was really good enough, even really good coaches. I thought Steve Forbes would have been good then, but he probably wasn't ready, in terms of resume. But like, people turned their noses up at Mick Cronin last time, and I don't like him like at all.
He wins ball games, though.
He would be great.
Not this year, but every other year.
Yeah. Like, he would be successful here. Depending on how you define that, like, he would do well here. I think that there are 30 coaches who would do well here. Like, I think it's life and death. Like, you've got to find a guy that will be successful, but I don't think it's a diamond in the rough. Anybody you think of, any of the guys you like, plus 10 other guys, will certainly do better. And I'm not really trying to take a pot shot, but like, there'll be improvement right away, just by doing a lot of the basics that we all feel like kind of don't get done right now. But I mean, you name some run of the mill guys, some that seem reasonable to you. I think they would all do well here, all of them. I just don't know how many would. If Louisville fans can make peace with it not being a splash by just the mere hiring, but let the person actually do work. Gosh, name somebody. Name a above average coach.
Will Wade. I know that's a splash, but how about Todd Golden at Florida?
I think he would do well. He would do extremely well here. Yeah, him, Mike White.
Yep, Chris Jans.
Yeah, Chris Jans would be very, very well received here, because they rock fight on offense, but they fight on defense. Like, they are ugly.
They call him the dentist for a reason.
Absolutely. And you are 100%. I spent a year, doing an athletic department newsletter for Mississippi State. So I watched them all. And like, yeah, they're brutal, but we love that. Like, they'll muck games up. They don't have, like, we know we can't win a game because we can't shoot, but then they win. And that's the resourcefulness and desperation, that sort of thing. Like, Chris Jans would be great. I think he would be wonderful here. I would Otzelberger at Iowa State would be wonderful here. So for me, it's pass fail. Like, the pool of guys who I think would be very successful here is much wider than people wanted it to be last time, and it might need to be. I don't know that you'll be able to get Scott Drew to leave Baylor. I just don't know if that's even possible. Would I love that? Of course. I think.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the home run of home runs to me. Is him here, and it would be as close to hiring Rick Pitino as there is in terms of a star who's won a championship and has fixed a disaster. and built something, choosing to leave it to come here. Like, it would be out of this world. But I truly do think there's 24 coaches who would do very well here. If you could get, you can't, but if you could get Holloway to leave like Seton Hall, he would be incredible here. He'd be, Shaka Smart would be unbelievable here.
Even like an Ed Cooley.
1 year too late for Pat Jaggers. Pat Jaggers was alone. I was alone for Steve Forbes, and he was alone for Ed Cooley.
I will say Pat Jaggers did the work though, and figured out what the buyout was for him at Providence. He was not worth that buyout. He's a good coach, but he was not worth the buyout. That if you're paying that type of buyout, you might as well pay Mick Cronin $16 million.
Right, who do you think is like the lowest profile guy that would do well here? Like, just run through guys in your brain. Can you think of somebody?
What about someone like Greg McDermott at Creighton, who's been there forever?
I would love that.
Yeah,
I think he would do extremely well here. No, I think that's a very good call. I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that'd be a fun one. Jamie Dixon at TCU.
Yeah,
I still can't believe Pitt ran him off. I mean, what a mistake that one was.
You know what's worse about that? And this is just. Don't ever let anybody say like that I'm not accountable to myself. I killed Kevin Stallings in Pitt. Killed
as you should have.
And I hate him. He's on my list. You know, he's Whitlock to me, you know, like Stephen A. Like, I do not like him. And Louisville's much worse than his Pitt teams were. Much worse. And I never thought that day would come. But yeah, Jamie Dixon would be excellent. I think he'd be very successful here. Yeah.
As much as I hate him, Fred McCaffrey scores a lot of points.
That's fair. That's fair. Go Huskers.
Yeah. I mean, like, but you're saying there's so many names. But to me, where I look at it, like, I don't think they can pay Scott Drew, you know, to do the Goodman thing of you know, $10 million a year. I just don't really see how realistic that is. But
I'll add. The one problem I would have with like money whipping the superstar is
it puts a lot of pressure to win big immediately.
Yeah, think about Jimbo Fisher going to A&M. Like, they were never allowed to have any intermediate steps. So like, just say, you know, Junior Bridgman and 5 other people come up with bazillions of dollars, and you get Scott Drew to come here at $10.5 million a year, and you make the splash. Can they be a 7 seed next year?
That's a tough thing, because I feel like I like that you bring that up, because the expectations for Louisville, I don't want to dumb it down and say, you know, don't strive to be a leader or all that stuff, but off the bat, would they
give that guy any time?
Yeah, like you don't go from, you know, 10-37 to a Final Four team very often in 1 year. Like,
but you
can go from that to a tournament team, and be a 7 seed. Yeah. And be, you know, competitive. I think that's the big thing for Louisville.
And
they need to do this in steps. You don't go from 0 to everything at once.
But when you pay a guy bazillions,
that's what you're paying him to do.
Well, I think people are far less likely to let there be steps. What are we paying all this money for? I really do think that's what happened with Jimbo at A&M. Like, they couldn't make any mistakes because they were paying him such an embarrassingly big contract. So in a weird way, like, I kind of hope a workman-like kind of guy gets it so that the expectations are appropriate. The expectations are always going to be that they get really, really better really, really fast because they can. Yeah. You know, if I have any advice for whoever the next person is, don't preach patience. Don't do it, because no one wants to hear that. It's not your fault, but Kenny ruined that for you. You don't get to do that. I'm sorry. The next guy better be an egomaniac. He better have a lot to say. He better be like Bruce Pearl. I'm not saying Bruce Pearl, but like that. He's going to have to be larger than life. He's going to have you can have confidence in me until you can have confidence in us. We're going to get this thing turned around now. This is Louisville. Like that, the next person's got to say all that.
Yeah. Well, which of the names that have been thrown around a bunch, that's one of the reasons I really like Jerome Tang.
Yeah.
Because, you know, he showed, I get it, this year hasn't gone as well from him as the first year did, but he went from, you know, team picked last in the Big 12 to the Elite 8 in 1 year. And they've had, some issues with the Naquan Tomlin stuff and all those things to where he might not be the happiest at Kansas State right now, to where, he has charisma. He already battles Kentucky, both on the court. I mean, you don't want to do the Billy Gillispie thing of hiring the dude just because he beat Kentucky in the NCAA tournament, but he beat him on the court, and he's, beating him for some recruits, and he talks about them. And, he already kind of has that thing going with Calipari a little bit. But more importantly than that, the dude's won games, and he's, a personality. And I look at Dusty May, who was in the Final Four last year with FAU, and say, you could get him and not pay him $8 million a year. And the dude, I think, he'd come in and win games. And then, you could also go, everyone says Chris Beard is the bleep it, let's just win games guy. I think you could hire Will Wade, one, for less money, and two, explain away what he did a lot easier than the allegations against Chris Beard, to be quite honest.
So we had somebody who texted into the show, the end of the show yesterday, ask a hypothetical. If you were Louisville, and which bullet would you choose to bite? The bad PR for Will Wade or the bad PR for Chris Beard? And I said, I'm taking Will Wade because the recidivism there isn't nearly as dangerous, right? So, and the issue with Chris Beard is not, are you afraid of the media backlash? The issue, and I hope everyone hears this, the issue with Chris Beard is the fear that he does it again. That's sort of the thing that got him in trouble, and that you chose to bring him here knowing there was a possibility of that. That's the danger, not people thinking bad of Louisville for doing it. Ole Miss didn't care about that, and Ole Miss is a desperate enough place that for them it was worth it. I just don't think Louisville has to do that to take a chance like that. And that was why I didn't like when they hired Bobby in 2018, or when he came back in 2014, excuse me. I didn't think they needed to do that. It looked like it was more desperate than I felt like they were in a position to have to be. And I still think that about Louisville basketball, even as much as they're struggling.
You'll like this. I'll pull it up for anyone who's watching on the video. I had a Facebook memory pop up yesterday, 10 years ago yesterday. Welcome home, Bobby.
Oh, baby.
Speaking of Bobby 2.0, changed man, baby. Come on. But
he'll be the head coach at Arkansas by October.
You're not wrong. But I think Chris Beard has the better track record, but sure. I'm not sure if the gap of that is as big as what it perceives to be. Obviously, Chris Beard was in a national title game. Yeah. But Will Wade had LSU in the Sweet 16. And he's been to the second weekend, one less time than Beard, I think. I mean, it's 2-1. It's not, neither is a huge, gigantic sample size, but, his LSU teams were good. Like, they were pretty good.
I think the issue there for me is more, and this, we've talked about this on the show sometimes in regards to Mick Cronin. This back-to-back coaches here at Louisville have just melted under the spotlight of the job.
And could Will Wade handle that?
Well, no. Could Chris Beard
or Will
Wade? Yeah, that sort of thing. But like the guy's got to have some charm and some charisma. Like for Rick, it was fuel. Not only did it not drain him, it fed him. And I think they need that person. And I think Chris Beard would handle it no problem. I think he's got all the charisma in the world. I don't think Will Wade does. I think he's kind of sniveling. Like I think he's like, people don't like him. And I just feel like the last thing in the world, not don't like him because he wins, don't like him because he's kind of a turd. And so I would worry about how well that would work.
My thing would be Chris Beard. If you win games, it washes everything away. And I will say, I think early on in the Chris Mack era, before they started losing, people kind of rallied behind that he was kind of, I'm not going to say that he was kind of arrogant and had the ego. He would go out Calipari. He called him a chicken. I mean, everyone loved that he wore the bomber jacket at Louisville Live. Yeah. I can see Will Wade having a little bit of that side of it. And, if you're winning games in the NCAA tournament, I think people win that. But yes, no, I definitely agree that Chris Beard is more of a personality than Will Wade is. Is to where it'll be on it, obviously very fascinating to see what happens. And who knows, maybe, something insane happens and Louisville goes on a run after this Miami game. But
all right, here, last year, I'll ask you this one as a way to sort of cap this.
Yeah.
So Louisville wins, and we're both talking about replacements. So what I don't want you to be realistic. I want you to tell me what you think. In your mind, what are they now? 6 and
9. Nice.
What does their final record have to be to where you'd be like, yeah, they should bring Kenny back for year 3? I see where this is going.
I think you gotta at least be an NIT team.
Okay.
Like I've been consistent on that. Like you don't have to be in the NCAA tournament, but you got to be at least fringe bubble. To me, like it's year 2. You went 4-28 last year. You don't get to go, 13-19 or something like that and say, well, we won 9 more games than last year. What do you want from us? You got your Louisville basketball. You put yourself in this spot where you went 4-28 a year ago, to where you got to be somewhere probably in that 15, 16, 17 win range for me to even consider it.
Yeah, they've got 2 games against sub 100 teams left on KenPom, and that's Georgia Tech and Notre Dame. They have to win those.
Yeah.
No, they cannot lose those. And then you've got teams in between 50 and 100. Boston College, Syracuse, Pitt again, Florida State at 98. You got to win all those. Like I'm with you. Like I think they've got to be over 500 down the stretch here. They've got to finish 15, 16 wins, and it feel like, oh man, do we really want to stop this? Because I'll still go, it's not numbers. I've been saying this all along. It's just that there's going to be a vibe, and we're either all going to get it, or most of us are going to, or we're not. And anything less than this being definitive, that we totally can see where this is going. Imagine if they do win like 10 out of the last 15 games or something down the stretch here.
Then they'd be 16-15. Right.
But you basically would have a second half of the season that's the inverse of the first half of the season. But the likelihood would be that it's Caleb Glenn and Curtis Williams and Ty-Laur Johnson, young guys who you would expect to come back, and you could preach, now let me supplement these guys with some really impactful guys out of the portal. Like, that's just the basketball part. Then there's all the other elements of being the head coach that he'd have to really start turning around equally. I'm pretty skeptical that that'll happen, but I think it would have to be that dramatic. He's got to overcorrect. He's got to undo some of what's happened, not just start doing what he's supposed to do now.
Yeah. And like, that would almost be more encouraging than if they win like 3 more games the rest of the regular season than did a Patrick Ewing and won the ACC tournament. Like that would feel fluky to me. But
I listen, if he did that, they would fire him before the ACC tournament. Like, to avoid that, you're just not going to let that happen. Like, I think the echo of the final whistle, he's out of
here. I can see that because I mean, you brought it up. I mean, you can't wait around for the contract, the buyout to fall because that doesn't happen until March 30th. Yep. You can't miss a month of transfer portal for $2 million. You're losing more money than you're saving.
Too much rides on next year being better than that.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. I mean, obviously, if they win Saturday at NC State, this kind of becomes the pivotal game of if you can find a way to somehow win that game, then you can go, okay, Miami maybe wasn't
Let's
a fluke.
See where this goes.
Yeah,
right.
it was. Right. It's a brutal schedule coming up after that. But if you can find a way to win that game, you can say, okay, let's see what happens. Maybe we start to change our tune a little bit. But until that happens, there's too much evidence the other way, unfortunately, for Louisville. Well, we'll go ahead and cap it there because I know I've kept you over an hour mark, and I really appreciate. I really appreciate the time. It really just flies by, man. A lot of fun with you today. We'll have to get you back on again soon. For Mark Ennis, again, host of the Drive 939 The Ville, 3 to 6 p.m. daily. You can find him on Twitter at Mark Ennis. I'm Jack Grossman. We'll catch you next time here on Full